husband and wife, man and woman. Just a couple of weeks ago, we got a budget hearing on child care. And I offered to this eminent doctor who was testifying, and there were all the Children's Defense Fund people in the front row, and you know what side they were on this issue. And I was saying to this eminent doctor, and he kind of surprised me. I thought he was going to be a very liberal guy. Well, I said, you know, it's come to my attention, doctor, that over the last several decades there's been a diminishment of the American family. Family structure is not sound anymore. It's not respected. It's not heeded. It's diminished. And I believe our children are suffering for it. Isn't it better, doctor, to have a child come into the world in a home where the mother and father are raising the child together? He said, oh yes, Senator. And I said, I understand some things don't work out. If that does not work out, is it not better, doctor, that the mother and father both still take an active role in the lives of raising that child? Oh yes, and he elaborated. Well, these ladies from the Children's Defense Fund, they weren't glaring. They were looking like deers in the headlights. I mean, they couldn't really find fault with what we were saying, he and I, and they were certainly astounded that he agreed with me, but they were just nonplussed. And so then I said, well, ladies, do you have anything to comment on this? Well, that didn't fit their script, so they couldn't deal with that. But it is kind of a sad state of affairs. And I've watched year after year in the state legislature bill after bill that are harmful to families. I'm going to have to vote on one just this Wednesday in Health Committee related to vaccinations. Now, I'm all for vaccinations, but I'm more for parents having a hand in the vaccination of their children. An ability to make a determination. When we have to weigh all things, it's the family. At a Planned Parenthood place many, many years ago, I toured up in Napa. Women asked me how I felt about informed consent. And I said, always, the parent must be giving consent. And they argued with me, and one of the women said, Senator, we know what's best. We know what's best. And I got very rankled. And I'm just a new farm boy now, hadn't been in the political arena too much. And I said, ma'am, I know they're bad parents, but the family bond and the blood bond is far more important. And I'll trust in that before I'll trust in you knowing more than the mother and the father. But we are under assault. I was asked coming in about how did fish get a greater water right than human beings. Well, I'm very involved in water from every perspective. I've farmed in Sacramento, San Joaquin Valley, east and west sides. I've represented the Delta and all the Sacramento River in its watershed, and I've been a part of every water plan since the 70s. And the courts have gradually eroded the human water right and elevated the fish water right. The legislature has done so also incrementally over the years, elevating the fish water right over the human water right. Now, we fought back in 2009. I was a key negotiator on the new water plan of 2009. And a couple of great victories. One is no longer was water policy going to be Delta-centric, meaning everything was then just about fixing the Delta. And by the way, we spent billions of dollars. And have you heard anybody say the Delta's fixed? Billions. Something called Cal-Fed. Billions. We still need billions to fix the Delta. One was the Racanelli decision that started giving the fish those superior water rights. And it's gone on as it's continued in the courts. But in '09, we had a victory. The water changed to be about north, including my long-sought area of origin protection language that's both in the statute and in the bond, Prop 1. Strongest area of origin language ever. NorCal Water helped me draft that language. And we added new language that said there were co-equal goals. Now don't laugh. The co-equal goals meant that, again, humans had a water right. See, to that point, and the reason I fought so hard to get co-equal goals in it, because that would put humans at the table, or at the stream, or at the faucet, again. So now we've got co-equal goals. However, everybody's still talking about fish. This drought is not about we having water. It's about the fish getting their water first. So the battle has not yet ended, but we have made some good progress. I'm delighted. Another significant achievement is there seems to be, by the vote of the people on Prop 1, a recognition that we can't conserve our way to the future for water. By the way, we can't do that for energy either. We need some new supplies. And in water, that means large surface impoundments, not just conservation. And this bond has money in it that would build Sykes Reservoir, as long as we get some support from contractors who will want to contract for that water. And another one down in northern Fresno County called Temperance Flat. So the first time since Oroville, Lake Oroville, we will have some substantial surface storage. Now I can't say so that's that certainty though, because the night we signed that, Governor Brown signed it, several of us within his office, I told my colleagues, the fight begins. What do you mean, Jim? We have to fight to ensure that the money that we put in the bond, if the voters approve it, that it goes to construct the surface storage, and it's not all siphoned off on other things, which some are already trying to do. And I've, in 2 consecutive budget committee hearings in the last month and a half, had the governor's Secretary of Resources respond directly to my question, answering that. Surface storage, large surface storage, is this the priority for the $2.75 billion in the bond Prop 1? And in both occasions he answered absolutely. Now I knew I drew blood in the second hearing because the liberal consultant who wrote the analysis for the committee hearing said that she had to take issue with the secretary's characterization that this was for storage. Well, folks, I don't countenance staff trying to interpret what the governor said, or the secretary said, or what I said. And I reminded the honorable body and my members of that. It was not for staff to second-guess the governor, and I read his ballot statement right out of the ballot Proposition 1 argument for it, and his agency secretary, and what the legislature did. And I wouldn't take any truck with staff making those kind of statements in an unfair, biased analysis. Well, I didn't pay her any mind. She was sitting a little across the room from me. But my staff said I was sure getting some dagger looks. And I am happy to get dagger looks from such people. We have to continue the fight, folks, because we've got to have some supplies of water. We cannot conserve our way into the future. Let me speak a little bit to the budget. It's not fixed. It's precariously balanced. And we don't need to renew that near $60 billion tax increase that was temporary. Temporary was 7 years. And already there are those pushing to renew it again. And I guarantee you when it reaches its end, or the date of its ending, they're going to be the gloom and doomers, and everything's going to crash, and all the schools are going to shut down, and all the prisoners are going to be let out of prison. Well, by the time we get that far, they will already be out, because most of them are a goodly number. Some 40, almost 50,000 of them have been let out, and I'll talk about that too in a minute. But the budget's not fixed, but we don't need to fix it with an extension of a tax increase or any others, and many of them are being proposed. A realtor asked me the other day about split roll. Is that still, where's the split roll? I said, well, ever since Prop 13, the split roll has been proposed every year. Meaning, oh, well, we'll leave the homeowners with their little Prop 13 benefit, but boy, we're going to soak it to business. Big, greedy business. Big, greedy business. We, small mom and pop operators, right? It's not just the big corporations, it's all of us. One fellow again is going to try a massive sales tax and broaden what we apply the sales tax to. Boy, that's going to get the filthy rich and everybody else. That's the idea. But worse, we fight the fight and we win some of these in terms of the taxes. That's good. But more fearsome to me, ladies and gentlemen, are the fines and the fees, and the tuition. The tuition. I had a very frosty meeting with the new president of the University of California a couple of months ago in my office, who had pronounced if the legislature doesn't give us all the money we want, we'll just raise tuition and accept more out-of-state and out-of-country students because we make more money on them. And we'll cut the number of in-state students. And, instead of getting it, she has only gotten worse with her rhetoric in that regard. Now, there's some words for that kind of thing that she's trying to do. I'll not use it here tonight, but I did tell her I do not respond to those arguments. Would she please tell me what they're doing at the University of California to do things more economically, to do things more cost-effectively, to marshal their resources in better ways, and to ensure that our students do not have to pay these unreasonable tuition increases? Well, that was a short conversation on her part. No answer, but arrogance. And the same arrogance typifies the agencies of government. There are some exceptions, folks. I do meet with some agency heads, department heads, who are trying to work with us a little bit. I'll be meeting one tomorrow that's trying to work with us a little bit. That director's problem is as he's trying to work with me a little bit, all of his staff are trying to undermine it every second of the day. But we, all of us in California, through your elected representatives all over California, now I don't count in that bunch, your folks up here, Lamoffa, Nielsen, Gallagher, you know where we've stood on these things forever, and railed against them, feeling very lonely, very often. But we have won some of the battles. But here's what we've got. The whole calling now to all the agencies is to become self-funding on your backs through fees. Why? Well, that's a sure source of money. The legislature may not give them all they want. And over the last few years, when they have not gotten all they want, they found a new trough. You, me, the off-wheel road folks. Well, we'll just raise the fees, raise the fines. And then the legislature gives some of them the authority to do that with nothing more than passing a regulation, not a statutory change. In the drought legislation last year, not the one that just passed, and I'll tell you about that one shortly, the one that just passed, I was one one of the few members of the legislature that voted no, and the only one that debated against it. What did it do? Oh, this is all good to help us with money for the drought. Well, it did shift a little bit of money around that were in unexpended bond funds from previous bonds. But it gave the water board the ability to raise fees and to raise your fines by unilateral action, by doing no more than putting on the agenda a regulation permitting them to do that. And then exempting that regulation from the review by the Office of Administrative Law. Now, I know about that because I helped create that in my very second year as a legislator. The Office of Administrative Law, any regulation was supposed to go through that body to determine if there was a whole statute that undergirded the regulation. So it wasn't what you call an underground reg, that it had statutory authority and foundation. And then something I put in it said they had to consider the economic impact of the regulation. Well, they've sure given that one a short shrift over the decades, even when they've been around. But it's still in there. But they were exempted now, are exempt. So, the governor calls it drought emergency. That board can really lower the boom on all of us with fees and fines any way they want to. No public review, no accountability. Absolute ability to raise your taxes without representation. Now, nobody wants to call it that, but it sure is expedient, and it sure does make me mad. And it is another reason we've got to get our government back in the hands of the people and out of the hands of the fourth branch of government. You know, we used to make it kind of easy to condemn the politicians. And I'm sitting around a bunch of them and I get aggravated as heck. But I now have more fear of the agencies of government than I do my colleagues. With the exception of when my colleagues continue to give them more and more power. And I point that out to them in committee and on the floor debate, and they get sometimes a little bit uncomfortable. I'm glad to hear that, or notice that they get a little uncomfortable, but they still end up voting yes. Give those agencies those powers. Just this very day, I ran into another colleague, an officer in a city down on the coast that he represents was murdered. Oh, he was in the dither over that, how terrible that was. And he'd gone to the service and 10,000 people showed up. 10,000 people. Now I get a little angry, and you have to understand, because I was head of the Board of Prison Terms for all those years. I've looked at this up front and personal, and I go to all of these peace officer memorials. And 2 deputy sheriffs in Sacramento and Placer County are dead because of a law that Dan Lundgren helped me get in. I wrote it, and he put it in federal law. It was ignored by U.S. attorneys for years, and 2 deputy sheriffs are dead in Placer and Sacramento because it was ignored. So I get a little touchy about this. And our legislature, our governor, have unleashed an unprecedented crime wave on all of us. Upwards to 40,000 unrehabilitated felons now in our communities, right here. I can tell you on good conscience, within 2 miles of where we're sitting, there's an AB 109er, that was the bill's number. So I coined the term, these guys are the graduates of the Jerry Brown University of Realignment, the 109ers. And I hearkened to the days when we had the 49ers that made this state great. Now we've got the 109ers that are making us all victims. Well, there's one of them out there planning a crime right now, or doing it. So this member was all in a dither about this dead officer. Now, I don't know the facts in that case, but in most cases when an officer shooting, it is a product of legislative pressure imposed on the officers that put dangerous people out in our communities. And that's exactly what we've done, and we give them weapons to do it. And Laura's going to hand out a bunch of some of the bills that I'm working on to help this a little bit, okay? This is the worst legislation ever passed. Never before has your legislators, they've done a lot of dumb bills over the decades in the history of the state, but none like this where we have been put at risk to the degree that we have. And the people of California voted for Prop 47. Oh, we're not going to put these just drug guys away for a long time. That's too costly. We're going to put all that money into rehabilitation. Well, folks, there ain't any money of that going into rehabilitation. That's for darn sure. But there are sure a lot of Prop 47 folks roaming around out here now too. One of the greatest tools that we have used over the years in our courts is drug court. And drug court has worked. I helped start the first one with Judge Darrell Stevens in Butte County in the early 80s. And why does drug court work? The probation officer brings the fellow in and Your Honor says, well, officer, how's he doing? Well, he's doing pretty well. Stayed off and he's in his program. Okay, we're going to do another 3 months, take another look, and then maybe we'll put him into something else. Or he says, boy, he's sure been screwing up. Still taking drugs, still acting up. And Your Honor says, take him through that door. That means incarceration. Now, with Prop 47, nada. In fact, your home can be burgled. And the burglar's going to get a ticket. Come back and burgle your home tomorrow night and get another ticket. That's what Prop 47 has done for all of us. And will it solve the drug problem as the ballot title said it would? Nope. No. Our Attorney General duped those who voted yes. Duped them. Now you see, I've got a bill in to take away the authority of the Attorney General to write that ballot argument. Because this particular Attorney General has been particularly bad about skewing and being deceitful in the ballot title, which most Californians, that's all they read. Now that's fine on them, and I don't cut them any slack. If somebody tells me their house got burgled, I don't do this, but I want to. Well, how'd you vote on Prop 47? Another one give you a chuckle. Last week of session last year, we came back from, we took a hour lunch break. Then I came back and one of my colleagues was sitting at his desk all really down in the dumps. I said, what happened? Oh, I went down to Denny's. That would be at Richards Boulevard in Bearcat, right off of I-5, just by the river. To Denny's to have lunch. And I came out and my window of my car was smashed and my briefcase was taken and all my stuff was in there. All my cards and all my identification, everything was gone. Oh, I said, I'm so sorry. I know that this ruins your life, doesn't it? Now what I wanted to say is, and I know how you voted on 109. But I did say, oh, I'm so sorry, but you know, you better be careful down there, Jim. You see, that's where the so-called homeless hang out. And just up the street, up Richards Boulevard, where they get their food, at the food bank. And the homeless shelter. And they hang out down by the river. So if you are doing your business down by the river, you're easy pickings. I'd not go to that particular Denny's again. But it sort of makes me angry. I am kind of half facetious. Another bit of hypocrisy. Last week, ladies and gentlemen, you'll be glad to know this, it launched Sunshine Month in California. Well, I wasn't too hot about that because I'd rather have a little bit of rain in the few weeks we've got left when that's a likelihood or a possibility. But we're having sunshine. So I get up and debate how good it was to have sunshine. But then I offered that the legislature seems to be having an eclipse of this sunshine. Because this legislature is doing everything else behind closed doors, and the people don't know, and even you legislators don't know what's going on around here. You don't read the bills. You don't even have a chance to read the bills. I've got to fight to be able to get a budget bill to my staff a few hours before we vote on it. Hundreds and hundreds of pages. We don't even get it. Nobody gets to read it. And if you watch me on the cable channel there, you'll see me quite often in committees saying, you know, I'm not talking to my colleagues. I'm talking to all of you out there. This is what your legislature has become. Nobody here knows what they're voting on. They either haven't had it even before them to read, they have not read it, or they've taken the offer of an author that I'll take an amendment down the way, or we'll fix the bill in the other house. What? What are you talking about? This is where you fix the bill. This is where you have your authority. Do you realize you're giving up your authority? Abdicating? And I said, it's worse than that. You're giving up the authority of the people who elected you. They elected you to be their eyes and ears and pay attention to business, and you're not paying attention to business, and you don't have any idea what you're voting on. Now, those kind of things make me really angry. How do we change it, folks? The Tea Party has played a role in that. And the fact that you're still around is encouraging. But not enough. And you know, we need to be marshaling this force all over California, like happened in 1978 with Prop 13. County upon county rose up to take this government back. And with rare exceptions, over the decades, though we've hung on to the essence of Proposition 13, there's been a constant, steady erosion of your ability as a private citizen to control your government, to have a say in your government, either directly or through your representative. Just recently, these two hearings on the water plant, the Senate's making a big deal of these oversight hearings. Well, don't get all excited that there's much oversight going on. They're justification hearings. And how do they work? They have selected members of a panels. Sometimes they'll have 3 panels of 2-3 people. All selected to be of one mind to present one point of view. And on this first of the water ones, actually the second one, and even the third one later, I demanded that farmers be allowed to be on the panel. 3 panels, 3 people each, and I'm demanding 2 farmers. And the chairman says, well, I'll give you 1. Wow. Our most important industry, we get 1. 4 o'clock that afternoon, my office got a call and said, well, we're not going to do it that way. Oh. But anybody can get up at the end and say how they feel. Well, at the end, there ain't any end, okay? In that hearing, that august panel of one-minded people talked for 4 hours and 40 minutes. And all the rest of all of us were given 20 minutes. And there was a whole bunch out there. So what they got to do is, I'm John Jones and I like this or I don't like it. Bye. I'm Sarah and I don't like it. Bye. That is not a public hearing. That is not public participation. That's a fraud and a joke. It makes me really angry. In fact, I started the day announcing that I was going to self-appoint myself the voice of all those people. In testimony 3 months ago before the State Water Resources Control Board, I was testifying on these same issues before that board that has a tremendous amount of control over all of your life. There were 400 farm workers out there, campesinos, los pobres de la tierra, farm workers. They were standing out there. They'd come from all over California to be heard, and I know they were not going to get to talk. But I knew that I was. So when I was invited up and introduced myself to the panel, I said I was going to be the voice of all those farm workers. And all those farmers that were out there in the audience that were not going to get to speak today, and after today's testimony, they would not have heard the last of me. Now, to their credit, they were polite, but stacked deck pants. That's not the way your government's supposed to work. We need to take it back. And the Tea Party's the one good place to do that. A lot of very important moral issues are before us. And I feel so lonesome down there. Now with James Gallagher, I've got a partner now there. I'm not so lonely now with James down there. But his mic will go up and my mic will go up and just a few more, but not many. Even on these very important moral issues, as I told you, taking man and woman, husband and wife. And I'm the only member of the Senate that gets up and says that's a bad idea. Out of 40, we're in trouble. We've got to take it back. But don't let me deflate. I believe that we make a difference. I believe the Tea Party has had its opportunity and still has to make a difference. But only if you continue to come here. And further, and this is my challenge to the Tea Party, come to Sacramento. Come to these hearings. I can't inform you of every single issue and every single hearing. I had one of my friends up here the other day. Well, I didn't know about this. I said, my friend, I can't call you on every single thing. You've got to be an informed citizen not to agree on your own. Now, I've got good staff, and I've got a newsletter that goes out. How many do we send that out to? 20,000? About 20,000 every quarter. And I'm in the newspaper literally every day. Radio, I'm doing everything I can, but you have to do something on your part too to find out. And then when I call you, don't say I'm too busy. I'm getting a little rankled at this too. When I called some farmers, once I got a concession in one of those hearings to have some farmers come testify on the water deal. Oh, I'm too busy. I got a board of directors meeting. It's planting season. Goodbye. I didn't have any time to wait anymore. They gave up. They're not players anymore in my book. If they don't make it more important to skip a board of directors meeting when their whole future is directly and absolutely on the line. And some of our believers, and I'm not saying that congregations need to come down and get political, but those therein need to find out. And when there are these moral issues in committee, in the Judiciary Committee, it'd be great to see the room packed with people that say we don't like this. Folks, we're all too busy. But if we're too busy, I assure you there are others who are not too busy to direct the course of your future. I'm going to wind up because I want to have some good stimulating questions from you. Accept what I say as a challenge we're all capable of. We've brought our country back again and again and again. But never has this country been at greater risk than we are today. I tell you, at least in my lifetime, we've got Pearl Harbor brewing out there in many fronts right now. And we have the weakest president, I think, in the history of our nation. The word traitor comes to mind too. As somebody that so willingly makes us weak and vulnerable, you do have to wonder. Editorial opinion for tonight. Let's have some questions, please. Anybody? Stan Cleveland.
The governor made a comment about exempting the agriculture on the water restriction. What's your analysis on that? He seems to be standing up, even though people are saying, well, that's only 2% of the state's economy, but they're not telling the whole truth, because that's 12% of the nation's agricultural economy. So, what is your thoughts on this?
Well, give Jerry Brown credit where it's due, okay? I'm the only one down there that's known and worked with Jerry Brown 1 and Jerry Brown 2. I was first elected to the Senate the year he was re-elected governor the first time around, and we've been dealing with each other ever since on all kinds of things. But a year ago, he and I both achieved what I'd call part of our legacy. Proposition 1, the water bond. Proposition 2, the rainy day fund. Now, he never worked quite so sincerely on the rainy day fund over the decades, but he has worked on water. Jerry Brown won, and I fought over that because his whole water plan was the peripheral canal, but he's come around now, and Prop 1 was a good deal, so was Prop 2. And him taking that strong stand for agriculture, I've never, ever heard it. Remember, this is Jerry Brown that gave us the mid-flight. Yeah, said surprise. Well, I'm the guy that fought him on the mid-flight. In fact, when he was sworn in, I reminded him, me being elected when he was re-elected, and he said, yeah, I remember your precocious daughter. She kind of challenged him that first day. And I said, but you and I immediately began fighting over the mid-flight and the peripheral canal. And he said, yeah, you whipped me on both of them. And I said, yeah, but we're still fighting on them, aren't we, Governor? And we still are. Well, it surprised me that he was as staunch in saying agriculture is given. But he was dead right. Because our industry has already made huge sacrifices over decades, over generations. And you know why we did it? Because it was in our economic interest. Man who gave us a prayer talked about capitalism, okay? That's a pretty doggone motive. Capitalism. And agriculture conserved because water became more and more dear, and it was in agriculture's economic best interest, and in then forth all of our best interest for us to conserve water. And I appreciate that Jerry Brown acknowledged that and said we're not going to hit agriculture again. But there ain't much more hitting than can come, folks. On the Central Valley Project, most of them got zero allocation. Zero nada. We don't have much better on the State Water Project. And unless they have some water in Friant or Pine Flat, where we got our water for our ranch down in the valley, or if you're at San Francisco and you have Hetch Hetchy, or Los Angeles and you have the Owens Valley, oh, you're doing okay. Well, I delight in pointing that out, telling the folks from San Francisco, well, you know, give me little Yosemite Valley back. Let's drain Hetch Hetchy. And let's give all that fish to the water to the fish in Hetch Hetchy. They don't like that idea. Yeah, I was surprised, but delightfully so. And when he deserves praise, and he does on this one, Stan, I'll give it to Jerry Brown. Sure enough. Way in the back there, in the red.
Where's the governor on the water that's going straight to the fish? What's his position on that? And is he willing to take any stands and fight for that?
As far as the water going to the fish, his statements are well received. Statements that he's just made about not hitting agriculture any harder. However, his agencies are still full speed ahead on something called in-stream regulation. Now it's called, that was what it used to be called, now it's flow regulations. That's how much water has to be in a stream or a waterway. And this appointed non-accountable board will say how much water has to be in that stream. And that will be based on how much the fish need, not how much the farmer needs. Nor even how much the human being needs. We've been dealing with this for now 5 or 6 years up in the Siskiyous, where game wardens have come out to 78-year-old lady and others and said, if you don't sign this voluntary agreement, that I can stop you from taking your water to irrigate your alfalfa anytime I want to. If you don't sign this voluntary agreement, I will arrest you. Voluntary arrest, some things don't compute with me. That's not the way we're supposed to do it in criminal justice. No, to the contrary. The agencies are going hog wild. So the governor's protestations that agriculture be left alone really ring hollow, because he's the one that signed that bill that gives the water board even more power. And he signed the bill 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. The second round of drought legislation, which I again opposed. And how would I ever want to dare oppose something that would help with the drought? Because it doesn't. but it does give a lot more power. So those nice, lovely words ring hollow when you look at the day-to-day, the regulation by regulation, the vote by vote of the appointed people in government. Yes?
My name is Joanne. Can you please tell us about the drought and its relationship to the science of geoengineering as discussed by Dave Wigington and Paul Preston?
Now say that again. You're talking a little fast.
Can you tell us about the drought and its relationship to the science of geoengineering as discussed by Dave Wigington and Paul Preston?
Well, I'm not as versed with that, okay? I heard some of it tonight. You're talking about the UN decisions and actions, correct? And what's being planned within the UN. Well, that's an agenda that's far greater than our American agenda, or even our agenda here in California. That's world control. And I have no doubt whatsoever that it's an attempt to undermine capitalism. I have no doubt whatsoever. All I can say is capitalism has done a lot for the world. And you know who realizes it most? Those who lived under communism. There are 100,000 Slavic people in this area, south of here, that I represent, most of them, come from Eastern Europe, lived under communism. They know how good socialism is, how good communism is, and how good capitalism is. And I am moved to tell you one of the most moving stories of my life. I did a lot with Ronald Reagan over the years. I had the pleasure to know him pretty well. And I'm telling my Ronald Reagan stories one night, auctioning a book off, the Ronald Reagan Diaries. I auctioned that off for worthy events, and donate it. Then I'm telling stories, and this man named Florin Sercu, he is from Romania. He's a good friend. He said, "Senator, can I tell you a Reagan story of mine?" "Yeah, please, please." He says, "Do you know where I was when Ronald Reagan said Mr. Gorbachev to take down that wall?" "No, Florin, I did not." He said, "I was in a cell, in chains, in Belgrade, Yugoslavia, a political prisoner. I think he was about 16 or 17 at the time. And we heard those words, because the guards had the TV on, and we heard Mr. Gorbachev take down that wall. Senator, we had just a brief, fleeting moment of hope and a breath of freedom. Senator, do you know where I was 2 months later?" "No." He says, "I was in chains in the office of the United States ambassador in Belgrade, Yugoslavia. And the ambassador said, 'Take off those chains.' He left, settled here, as did hundreds of thousands of Eastern Europeans who wanted to shake that yoke and live under freedom and love their freedom and become citizens. They all want to become citizens, and they want to vote, and they want to have trust and confidence in their government. That's why I spend so much time with them, to give that trust and confidence in their government."
And they learn English.
And they learn English, yes, sir. Yeah, well, no, they still speak their Slavic language, but wherever they go, it's English. Well, that's not Romanian. I don't speak Romanian. I get by a little French and Spanish, but the point is, they came here not to be Slavic Americans, but to be Americans. Their heritage they practice, and they have their dances and their ceremonies, and I delight in being a part of it. But they love this country and the freedom. And by the way, there's two words that have to go together. They are inseparable. Capitalism and freedom. You don't have one without the other. And that's what those who want to get rid of capitalism know. And they're not for freedom, I assure you. Hey, we're taking many good turns here tonight. Any more questions?
Right back here. Carla has one.
What's the status of the cap and trade, which could increase gasoline by 75 cents a gallon?
Yeah, even the Air Board said 75 cents a gallon. By golly, I was afraid they were going to be honest, that they must anticipate it's going to be $1.50 if they said 75 cents. Cap and trade, folks, you know, it's looked at like this big, wonderful thing that's going to clean up all the environment, and we have this capitalistic trading of credits, totally artificial and inflated. And in economics, do you know how hollow that kind of a promise is? Who's going to invest in cap and trade units? But as long as government supports it, you know, oh, that'll work. Yeah, sure, it goes up and up and up. That's what cap and trade is about. Cap and trade, ladies and gentlemen, is not about greening up California. In one respect, it is.
Is it in effect right now?
Pardon?
Is it in effect right now?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And what it's greening is the state treasury to spend money on things, other government programs, to clean up the environment. Well, if we do a little bit of that, that'll be cool. They have to do a little bit of that to brag that some of the cap and trade money went into it. But since I sit on the budget committee, I can tell you where that cap and trade money has gone the last few years. And you know what? There's a lot of agencies of government that didn't get cut down and crippled and cut to the bone and didn't have to lay off a lot of staff because of cap and trade money. That didn't go into roads, by the way.
No.
And by the way, if you want to fix our roads, I've got a quick answer. Stop the train, put the money into our streets and rails. And you know, it may happen. More people are starting to talk about that. That the train is not going to work. Even Democrats. Even high-placed Democrats. Now, I fear until Jerry Brown leaves, we'll hang on to some semblance of that train because he's got this delusion that that's going to be his big legacy.
Who the hell wants to go to Bakersfield? I live there.
Well, I lived in the whole dang valley, you know, and I tell that oftentimes. I said, you know, I farmed down there from Merced to Bakersfield, and I tell you, I don't know teeming masses of people who are ready to jump on a train to go to either place, north or south. And I know, and I've said this in committee after committee, including last very week, those trains aren't going to haul any freight. And that's the only place there's any money in the rails. No money in people. See Amtrak. And they don't even make any money on people, but to the degree that they're subsidized by all the taxpayers. So tell me that that's going to be a good idea. It'll founder. And the peripheral tunnels will too. They're just going to be too costly, and we can't afford them, and we won't. But until Jerry Brown leaves, since he's got that on his brain, that's going to be on his tombstone, we're stuck. This lady over here somewhere had it. Yeah. I'll get back.
How do we know the upcoming bills that you guys are doing? So if we want to go to the Capitol to listen, how do we know ahead of time?
Okay. She says, how do you know ahead of time? Well, it's hard and it's not hard. Those of us, and I consider myself one, who are technologically challenged have to do their best. And as before I got into computers, which I'm a bit into now, Laura will attest I'm semi-competent. By the way, this is Laura Nicholson, my staff person up here. It's just a great person. She's a former publisher and editor of your newspaper, by the way, so I got her out of the newspaper business and got her to come to my side. You know, the internet is a wonderful place to go. You can watch the whole bloody legislature if you want to. And they list the things that are going on. And in a given week, you can call my office and say, is anything particular big coming up? The papers do a minimal job. That's not real important to them, anticipating things and putting it on the list. Try to get on our newsletter list, and I think we put about 20,000, and we talk about issues that are going down and others that are going to be coming up. That's another way. Listen to the radio and look to different media. Before I learned to use the internet and all kind of other things, I read about 5 papers a day. why would I spend all that time? Well, I know what part of the paper I need to read to learn things, and I know what part I don't need to waste my time with. A Sacramento Bee editorial page is not of that much value to me. But I learn where to find that information. So those are just some quick ideas. And then if you're part of any organizations, and in your organization, you publish stuff and put stuff out quite a bit. Different other organizations also do. If you're in such the off-wheel road folks, they have a newsletter. Look in those newsletters. Try to get on their mailing list. And just get on as many as you can. And if you want more specifics, get a hold of Laura. She'll help you just a little bit to what degree she can as a one-person office over here. One more in the back.
You're not going to like this question, I know. And Paul Preston's not going to like this question. We've gone down and testified before the legislature, and it's a party line vote, and it doesn't matter. There's a line out the door of people supporting something. The Democrats don't like it. With just 4 people testifying on their side, they vote, party line vote. What people say means nothing.
Well, I guess you didn't listen to what I said before. Yeah, I'm down there all the time, and I see those lines, okay? But in that I'm down there so much of the time, I see those rare occasions when that testimony does make a difference, when it does get their attention. When I look over at my Democratic colleagues and I see them kind of scrunching down, I know at least I've made the vote tough on them.
That was my question. Had you ever seen any time it actually made a difference? And so thank you for answering that.
Absolutely. On the water bond, on Proposition 1 and Proposition 2. These are huge, okay? I said that for Jim Nielsen, those are both lifetime achievements, okay? I've been working to get something like that my whole political career since I was a 22-year-old farmer starting to get to be a leader in my industry. And last year they became a reality. The water and the rainy day fund, which takes 1.5% of the whole state budget off the top and puts it into a rainy day fund and makes it a lot harder for the Democrats to spend it. That happened. And even myself, who worked so hard on both of those measures, I wasn't sure they were going to pass. And I was astounded when they passed the Senate unanimously and only had 2 no votes in the Assembly. So something happened. What happened? Thousands and thousands of hours, a lot of communication by a lot of people throughout California, in districts all over the place, showed some Democrats that that was important. And their leadership stood up and said, yes, we're going to make a deal here. The Republicans stood up and said, put our hands out and said, come on board, we're with you. And it happened. Doesn't always happen. But it does happen. I've seen remember the electrical deregulation of years ago? Passed one year. I remember the guy who's carried it. I won't give you his name. He's long gone. But that was going to be a wonderful thing. And boy, when people found out what it was going to cost, that got repealed very quickly. There was something in 1978, when I first became a legislator, called the bottle bill. A tax on your bottles to recycle. Now that's a long, long ago story, but that bill passed the year before I got there, and the stuff hit the fan when people found out what that was going to mean to all the stores in California, and that got repealed in hours. So yeah, it can happen. You have to wait for those victories, and you savor them when you have them, and you grind your teeth when you don't. Yes?
Yes, a few weeks back we had a speaker who mentioned that there were, I'm not sure on exactly, maybe 360 dams that are across the country that are on the chopping blocks that could be eliminated. Why would, in light of our drought and water shortage, and we know that dams build backup reservoirs that serve the need for municipalities, agriculture in times of drought when we need that reserve water. Why would they want to eliminate and take out all these dams?
take out all of the dams. Well, that's
Not all of them, but I mean,
well, yeah, there's always been a move. Now, we've had a victory there too, by the way. You know, you're giving me a chance. When I came back, there was a deal cut between the Schwarzenegger administration and the Oregon governor. I forget his name right now. And 4 dams on the Klamath were going to be removed. 4 dams. And in the water negotiation in 2009, one thing I did not win. I lost this one. There was $250 million in that bond that never went to the voters, fortunately. $250 million to take those 4 dams in the Klamath out. The farmers up there that I represented were all up in arms. And I was up in arms with them, and we were doing all kind of loud protesting about it. I didn't think we had a chance. But it didn't happen. That bond did not go on the ballot. That $250 million was not available. The federal government, fortunately, was not interested in putting up a bunch of their money. So that has languished. Now skip forward to last year on the water bond Prop 1. That $250 million is still floating around. I can't get it out of the water bond. But what I was able to do was to get it to be competitive. What does that mean? That $250 million would not all go to take those 4 dams out. It would go to all kinds of other things. So I'm pitting the environmentalists against themselves. Because there's going to be a whole lot of other projects that people are going to want, and those dams on the Klamath are going to quickly be forgotten, and I'm going to win my fight. So that was a victory, and I call that not just a victory for the 4 dams on the Klamath, a victory that we, and I say this when I characterize it, when I talk about it, we don't need to be taking dams out, we need to be putting dams in. In addition, in Prop 1, there is some money that I also fought to get in there that we'll have to fight that goes to this purpose. But for small impoundments up in the watershed regions, think of the hills to the east, okay? The heavy rains, we get all this erosion coming down. The environmentalists don't like that erosion, so I'm going to help them out with that erosion. We can stop some of that erosion. We can even put some small hydro in. So we need dams. We don't need to take them out. That's a question from the man in the back, right there, sir.
Yeah, I have 2 questions, 2 things here. First of all,
I'll get to you, sir.
oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
A short time ago, the California Supreme Court made a ruling that allowed an illegal alien a license to practice law.
Yes, I remember that particular case.
And more recently, California has began issuing driver's license to illegal aliens. We've now issued over 110,000 driver's licenses to illegal aliens. My question is, who made this decision? And in your opinion, are the people making these decisions not in fact criminals?
Are not what?
Are they in fact criminals? The people
Are they in fact criminals?
Yes.
No, they are not criminals. But sir, I must tell you that some of these decisions are unleashing criminals on us and putting us at risk. All right? Go ahead.
Who was it that made that decision for the driver's licenses?
That was a vote of the California State Legislature. Okay? Signed by the governor. And then there's something else called the Trust Act, and that means we're going to pay to put them through college. The majority of the legislature has gone along with that, okay? And I only assume a lot of people in California didn't mind very much because they didn't protest much and there weren't many people coming down to argue against those bills that gave them those driver's licenses, gave them those extra rights. I'm going to be dealing with a tough subject just this day after tomorrow about the vaccinations. I told you about that. Well, you remember all these tens of thousands of so-called children coming from Guatemala and everywhere else crossing our borders? Well, and others coming across our borders now, we're just bring them in, we're not going to deport them, Well, I don't recall anybody saying that we're going to make sure every one of them get vaccinated. I don't see anybody saying they're going to have to go through something like my great-grandparents did at Ellis Island and at least have a doctor look in their eyes. Nope, they're here to stay. There are burdens. Ladies and gentlemen, if we're worried about infectious diseases today, let me submit, in 5 and 10 years, this influx into our country of diseases that we know nothing about, we are going to have a problem. Yes, sir.
Well, first of all, the railway is going to stop at Bakersfield, right?
The what?
The railway that they want to build $1 billion, going to stop at Bakersfield?
It's Madera to Bakersfield.
Okay. Well, you got to take the bus from Bakersfield to LA.
Well, you do that on Amtrak too.
But I mean, it makes more sense to build a railway over the grapevine like they've been talking about for decades.
Well, the joke to that this thing goes 200 miles an hour. Well, I made that point again for about the 1000th time in committee last week. I said, maybe that might get up to 200 miles an hour at its peak, but the minute it gets at its peak, it's going to decelerate for the next stop. And the initiative that the people passed, I think, says it's got to stop every 50 miles or something. So it's going to have to be going around 400 miles an hour to average 200 all the way down there. And then you're right, when you get to Bakersfield, where are you? And oh, by the way, the people down on the coast and in Los Angeles and Beverly Hills, they don't want that train. Let me get this man over here. Did you get one yet?
Yes, these water issues are very important. And this area, your constituency,
You
many
bet.
of them are outdoorsmen. They're hunters, they're fishermen, and they're very concerned about these water issues as well. When you talk to your constituency that are outdoors people, what kind of response you get from them related to all these water issues?
Well, the sportsmen of California are also in the crosshairs, okay? And everything that's going on is to diminish hunting and fishing in California, or to limit it more and more and more. The reason for the changing of the Department of Fish and Game to the Department of Fish and Wildlife was purposeful, as I debated, to get rid of game. Because hunting, that's going to be part of the future. We're not going to be doing that. Those forces that are pushing this, they don't want any hunting and limited fishing.
I understand that, but I want to just get back to the question of water. The outdoor industry is a huge moneymaker for the state. They are also voting people. The word's getting out. And I'm just wondering, you don't want to, of course you want to build your constituency to get as many on your side as possible. So how do you explain the water issues to them?
Okay, this is not a hunter issue, this is a fisher issue more.
That's right.
Okay, to the fishermen, yes, Cal trout, the salmon folks, okay, they're concerned. Rightfully so. And there are things that can be done about it. Something I did, and I don't know if you ever heard of Zeke Grader, but he's the lobbyist for decades for the salmon fishermen in the ocean. And he said the greatest thing ever done for the salmon runs on the Sacramento River was something I authored in the 1980s called Senate Bill 1086, which was a management plan for the Sacramento River, and it's still around. And it facilitated the agencies of state, federal, and local government having to meet and talk with each other to solve problems related to the fishery runs and our levees, protecting our levees. All of that need to be balanced out. So we did that. Okay, so Zeke said that's the best thing that ever happened. So yeah, maybe he and I are the only ones that know that. If he says it helped, I'm really happy about that. But the point that I would argue to the fishermen, you've got to be sensitive to other things. And we need to preserve fish, and we can preserve fish. But the way we do it now is to build size reservoir, which can provide water for fish that we're not going to have in drought years like So the sports folks, I think, understand. And they have not been manning the bastions, the fishermen, opposing the two dams. And they have not been manning the bastions down here, with the exception of just a few from up north, about the dams on the Klamath.
There's a lot of questions in the Delta, for example, that are raised by Finnish fishermen. We realize that farmers need water. I think that's obvious. But there's some forage species down there that need water that are getting decimated, which forms the backbone of the whole ecosystem in the Delta, which affects all these river systems as well. And I'm just curious, do you get a positive hearing from these outdoorsmen? Because right now, there's no water. Everybody's going to be affected by that. And it seems like there's a huge constituency there, and there's a lot of money there. And when you explain this to them, you have these kind of discussions with outdoorsmen, fishermen?
Everybody, you bet. And for decades, sir, decades, because I used to represent North Delta and Central Delta. I represented the people down there in the North and Central Delta. And you know what I can tell you, and they cannot refute this, anybody who's the biggest advocate for more money in the Delta, that those billions that we've dumped into the Delta, mostly for studies, have not helped the fish a bit. Now, that tells me we're doing something wrong. If we're going to put prospective billions in the Delta, let's do something with it that works. And whatever we have done, and I'm asking simply that we inventory what, and I brought this up in committee 2 weeks ago, I want an inventory of what we have spent the billions on. We look at that, and we have to accept that didn't work, or it needs to be changed before we spend any more money in the Delta. Because all those billions have not helped the Delta. Since I began representing it in 1978, the hue and cry has been the same, the same, the same. Somebody needs to come up with better solutions. That means in the fish community, the environmental community, the agricultural community, everybody. We can do it together. In the back, and then we'll wrap up here pretty quick. Yeah?
You know, America's supposed to be the melting pot, and I don't see it. I look at it as a fine stew. A piece of Chinese, a piece of Japanese, Spanish, German, and I like it that way. I like O'Bara Street, I like Chinatown, I like the customs and costumes. I don't like this idea of, thinking we're going to be all blended together, the same color, the same size and everything. It's just...
Well, we are a great country because we have historically been a melting pot. And we welcome the teeming masses. We welcome them. We welcome them preserving their heritage. But if they want to stay here, look at themselves as Americans. My wife and I are well looked at as leaders in the Asian Pacific Islander community in California for a whole lot of reasons, okay? Things we've done. I don't speak Chinese, but one of the top Chinese leaders says Jim Nielsen speaks better Chinese than you do. Or because he thinks Chinese better than you do. Well, we formed an organization that in 15 years has become the largest in California. And we don't just include in ourselves Asian Pacific Islanders, although our scholarships and our internship program and the scholarship and the internship is reserved simply for Asian Pacific Islander youth. The voter forum is everybody, and all of our meetings and problem solving is everybody. And when we were forming the organization, coming up with a name, I asked for an addition, and I carried enough weight to get it. It's the Asian Pacific Islander American Public Affairs Association. Operative word in that name, American. And everybody in APAPA, it is called, thinks of themselves and thinks of their organization as Americans. That's what this Slavic community think of themselves as. They have their traditions, they have their churches, and they do all their ceremonies in the native tongue. Then they come back out and they're Americans. And proud to be, you bet, because they have been freed. They have freedom that they did not have, and they appreciate it like most of us don't appreciate. We've got these stupid bills every year to get more people to turn out at the polls. Motor voting, you name it. What happens to the, oh my gosh, the vote's terrible, 20%. Oh my gosh, we've got to do something. So they do a bunch of stuff, stays the same. It's a game that is being played not to get more voters, but to get more voters for a certain party. One more there, sir.
What's your position on our lack of representation in the North State? And is there anything that can be done within the California State Legislature to address the issue?
State of Jefferson.
Well, yeah, here's what the state of Jefferson has done a wonderful job of showing. That there are many very organized and disaffected people in California. They live in Northern California. However, I've always said at every one of these meetings I go to, form an alliance with folks up and down the Sacramento and San Joaquin valleys, not just up here. If we're just fighting our fight, we're not going to win. But if we include and broaden our base to include those who are similarly affected of the beliefs that you are on the issues that are dear to the Tea Party here, they may not have tea parties down there. Well, some of them do, but they have people just as passionate. But boy, I'll tell you, in Kings County about that train, those folks are ready to go to battle, and they are going to battle. So, broaden our base. Let's look for new allies. In the rural counties, that's what I do. And on the water plan, and on some of the public safety issues, guess where I found some allies? From Valley Democrats. Now, they're not necessarily conservative, but on some issues they are. And on some family issues, they vote with us. On public safety issues, they vote with us. On water and work and jobs, they vote with us. So make new alliances. So export your movement up here to the valleys.
Is there anything specifically that can be done within the California State Legislature to increase our representation in the North State outside of, forming a new state? Is there anything that we can do within the California system?
No. There's 40 senators and 80 assembly people. That is not going to change. And redistricting, what hurt was the 1964 one-man, one-vote decision of the Warren Court. And sadly, that Chief Justice happened to be a governor of California and happened to have been a Republican. But what happened there, see, prior to that decision, the Assembly, like the U.S. Congress, was apportioned based on population. The Senate was based on counties. In fact, Los Angeles County had one senator. And some of these had 2 or 3, the ones that I represented, people that I succeeded, all these 19 different counties that I represented. Sometimes they represent 2 or 3 or 4, but it was the cow counties, and the famous cartoonist, editorial cartoonist at the time named Erblock, drew a picture of a crooning cow. And he was singing, "I lost my vote in Sacramento," meaning the cow counties. With that decision, we did. But, let me just say this, over those decades, notwithstanding the fact that we lost all that representation, we haven't lost all of our battles. And that's the point. And what do we need to do to win those battles? We must put our best people forward to serve us. We must work with them and back them. We must help them find new allies in the San Joaquin Valley and the Sacramento Valley, lower than us, and help out. Up in the mountain counties, a lot of folks up in the mountain counties don't like the marijuana stuff that's going down up there. They're getting tough on crime in those mountain counties, folks. But we've got allies in other places. And I have learned that in the legislature, and that's where I've been able to be successful. That's where Doug LaMalfa has been able to be successful, and James Gallagher has been successful. We try to find those new allies. Let's take about one more, then wrap it up. Yeah, Jim.
You refer to the road tax, and
Cal Grants?
Caltrans.
Caltrans.
And I looked at the map in Yuba County this last week, and it looked like, you know, probably fish and game on, fish and wildlife, probably 10-15% of Yuba County. And I don't see why we should be, and I was told it was litigation last month. So I don't understand why, you know, we need to build our roads, we have to mitigate these environmental things to buy those properly when we should be putting money on the roads.
Well, you know, I'm afraid that that's a battle we've kind of lost, the mitigation. Ironically, the Bay Delta plan wants to take a lot of that Bay Delta money and put a bunch of habitat in the south end of the Yolo Bypass, which is a flood control facility, and you need to get the water out at the tail end, right? What are they going to do? Put a bottle stopper in the south end of the bypass. Is that the smart way to do it? No, it isn't. And the reason they want to do it is that will be the habitat mitigation for other things they're going to do in the Delta. Yeah, I'm very familiar with that game. Can we get out of that and not have to do the mitigation? I don't think so.
So we have the same issue in Sutter County with the bypass levy. They want to set back the levees either 1,000 or 2,000 feet, you know, for flood control, what they tell me, but it's mostly for environmental purposes.
Well, yep, the setback levies, there's always environmental mitigation. And, you know, I say in general, that's a battle. Well, in general and to a degree. In general and to a degree, we've lost that. But we can still get them on occasion to be reasonable, okay? I'm not going to say who and where, but a little issue here in the Sutter Bypass about 4 or 5 years ago, and I had a bureaucrat just jumping up and down on my seat in my office. He was just hot, and that guy was going to be fined, and he was mining dirt, and they were going to fine him because he was a miner, and it was just going to put in a duck bind. And some habitat, even some habitat that they wanted, and their conservation board was all supportive, but he's having a conniption fit. Stan's nodding, he knows, don't tell who it's on. But anyway, this bureaucrat is just going nuts, and I looked over at him, I said, "Sir, the meeting's over." And he looked like I slapped him in the face. He said, "I'm not done." I said, "No, you're done, the meeting's over." "I'm not done, I have more things to say." I said, "You don't have another thing to say. It's clear to me that you and I are not going to have a reasonable conversation, so I'm going over your head. You're done." And he still didn't get up, so I went over and put my hand out. I said, "Nice having you here today, sir, and happy birthday." Because he told me he came in, it was his birthday. As he got up to leave, I said, "You know, sir, you're going to have me to deal with for about 10 more years. Have a nice afternoon." That's how you deal with it.
Could you take this lady here?
Yeah, please. With what?
Convention of States. I don't want our constitution to change.
Oh, I don't either.
So what is the latest in legislation on Convention of States? Prop 13, what are they doing about Prop 13?
Well, first of all, in the Convention of the States, that's beyond just California, okay? That's a federal issue, and it rears its ugly head periodically. It seems to a degree it's rearing its ugly head again. Well, I don't think that there'd be enough support for that to happen in other states. Now, in crazy California right now, the state legislature, I wouldn't be surprised if that didn't pass.
So what are you doing about it?
Do you notice I'm getting shorter? You see, people say, "Jim, you've got big shoulders. You know, I lift weights all." I said, "Yeah, I'm getting big shoulders. I got big shoulders, but I'm getting shorter." That's what I'm doing, is I'm getting shorter every day. I keep giving it my best shot, folks. I don't always win, though. But no, I don't think the Constitutional Convention, frankly, in America is going to happen. And I hope we speak out very loudly against it. And we need to quit having the United States Supreme Court keep reinterpreting that Constitution based on contemporary world standards. Prop 13 is hanging in there. I'm one of the original Prop 13 legislators, elected the year it passed. I was a good friend of Howard Jarvis and Paul Gann. In fact, I spoke at Paul Gann's life celebration. He's a great friend, and I'm glad you are. I talk to John Kupal and David Wolf all the time. They're their top advocates. They had their 30th anniversary year before last, and they had me there because I was the last of the old breed that was there for the first go-around. Now, what I can tell you, though a lot of taxes are passed, Prop 13 has pretty much held the line over the decades under enormous onslaught and pressure. Just 2 days ago, a realtor said, what are we going to do about the split roll? I said, that split roll, that's an old deal. It comes up every year. It has ever since 1979. Somebody's always going to be, we won't mess with the property owners, the homeowners, but boy, we're going to get those greedy businesses. It's never happened yet. So far, Prop 13 is still alive and well. But let me tell you, it needs some infusion of new blood, new resources, and new financial support for our Prop 13 effort to keep Howard Jarvis taxpayers alive and well. Well, I want to thank you all. We'll hang around for just a little bit. I've got to go all the way up to Gerber and got to be back in the meeting with a very important director tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning.